Morning, the Senate Finance Committee will examine issues of racial justice and tax code inequality in America. Nobody of good conscience wants there to be a race-based penalty or a discount on taxes. Everybody ought to pay their fair share, and everybody ought to have a fair chance to get ahead. In practice, the U.S. tax code doesn't always work that way. If America's busted old tax code excels at anything, it's rewarding those who are fortunate enough to already have wealth. The lucky few with the top incomes can go years deferring their taxes, paying what they want when they want to. On the other hand, there is no deferral for a Black nurse who pays taxes out of every paycheck, or a Latina small business owner who pays taxes quarterly. According to a recent survey, a typical white American family has 8 times the wealth of a typical Black American family. Some of the cornerstone tax policies in America include well-intentioned tax incentives for home ownership, education, and retirement savings. Those incentives only really work for people who can afford to buy homes and set aside money for education and retirement. Those people are much likelier to be white. The committee is going to hear a lot more examples like those today, illustrating how the tax code adds to inequality in America. The fact is, some recent changes have made the situation worse. An estimated 80% of the individual benefits of the Trump tax law went to white Americans. Even the benefits that went only to the top 1% of taxpayers were skewed the same way. The American Rescue Plan enacted in March begins to change the math of racial injustice and tax code inequality. It expanded the earned income tax credit for millions of working people. It expanded the child tax credit and made sure millions more working families will receive the full amount available. Too often, families and individual workers with lower incomes, particularly Black and Latino, haven't had access to those full benefits. Those expansions are going to be game changers for workers and families in Oregon and across the land. They ought to be permanent, and I am working with members of this committee to make that happen. Now, inequality isn't just about race. It's about gender. Women business owners, particularly women of color, are underrepresented, undercapitalized, and underappreciated. The share of business revenues that go to women-owned businesses hasn't budged in 20 years. It's stuck now at 4%. Along with Senator Cortez Masto and Senator Hassan, Senator Cardin and I are introducing the Progress Act that's going to help boost that figure. Our bill is all about promoting investment in women and minority-owned businesses and helping them to grow and to hire more workers. Finally, family policymakers need better confidential data on how tax laws affect Americans of different races. Other federal agencies collect that type of demographic information, and policymakers can use it to improve them. The IRS does not. The fact is, the tax code isn't strictly about government funding. Congress decided long ago to use the tax code to tackle major social and economic challenges. The words Black or white or Asian or Latino or Native American don't have to appear anywhere in the tax code for tax laws to affect those groups differently. Too often, those differences are adding to inequality. Now, the IRS needs to meet a higher standard of confidentiality due to its history and the sensitive nature of taxpayer information. That said, it makes no sense to blind lawmakers to the key data that would illuminate injustice in our tax laws. It is time for more tax data transparency. This committee is going to make sure that happens in a manner that fully protects the privacy and confidentiality of each American's taxpayer information. I'm looking forward to discussing those issues and more today. There's lots to cover. I want to thank our witnesses, Senator Crapo. Let's see where you are. Professor Brown, very good. Your testimony makes clear that by giving tax breaks to those who are already wealthy, the tax code perpetuates longstanding inequality. Seems to me it's even worse than that. A Black family with the exact same pay stubs as a white family is less likely to own stock than the white family. Can you briefly describe your research with respect to stock ownership by Black households and how that plays into their ability to benefit from the capital gains tax rate?
So research shows that Black Americans, pretty much regardless of income or wealth, are less likely to own stock than white Americans. In fact, there was a study of the top 5% of Black wealthy Americans, and it showed they were less likely to have stock than white Americans. And the benefit of owning stock in the current tax code is taxes are much lower. So if I had a choice, I'd rather have my wages taxed at the low preferential rate that currently is what stocks are taxed at. So because Black Americans are less likely to own stock, we're less likely to take advantage of that tax break.
Now, it seems to be compounded by the fact that billionaires don't need to sell their capital assets. They can avoid paying any tax with all of the deferral loopholes in the tax code. Now, does the ability to defer taxes on capital assets, sometimes indefinitely, add to the racial wealth gap in your view?
Absolutely, because what a wealthy parent can do is buy stock, have it appreciate significantly, don't sell it. When they die, they leave it to their child as an inheritance, and their child gets it tax-free with a stepped-up basis, which means something that those on the committee, but people hearing may not know. So let's say my parent, well, not my parent, let's say a white parent bought stock at $10,000, and when they die, the stock is worth $100,000. Their child inherits the stock, $100,000 tax-free. The next day, the child sells the stock for $100,000. They have no taxable income because our tax laws give them a $100,000 basis equal to the fair market value. So that taxable gain will never be taxed by anyone. So yes, wealth is transmitted through gifts and inheritances, and white Americans are more likely to receive that than Black Americans.
Thank you very much, Ms. Brown. Let me turn to my Oregon neighbor, Ms. Rao, if I might. We're interested in your highlighting what you consider to be the top challenges for minority and female entrepreneurs in obtaining capital. And we're introducing some legislation today that is going to begin to speak to this, but I'd be interested in what you think the top challenges are to getting capital.
Sure. Thank you, Senator. So some of the top challenges that I noticed in my career in venture capital is that even when there are platforms for Black and Brown founders to be able to pitch their ideas, there's a lack of representation on the investor side to be able to understand and articulate the strengths of those individuals who are pitching. And so early in my career, what I started to do was to be the translator between those Black and Brown founders and investors. And so investors are looking at a specific set of criteria in order to consider a company investable. And what I would do is to be able to formulate the ideas of Black and Brown founders in a way that captures what investors are looking for. And I believe that with greater representation of different lived experiences on the investor side, that there will also be a greater propensity towards seeing what different models of success can look like, and thereby increasing capital access to Black and Brown founders.
Now, today, several of my colleagues, Senator Cortez Mastow, Senator Hassan, Senator Cardin, and I will be introducing two new tax incentives designed to flow benefits into the hands of minority and female business owners. The first is a tax credit for hiring first employee an incentive to hire that person. And the second is an investment credit to encourage investments in the smallest of the small businesses, those owned by individuals earning less than $100,000 per year. In your view, would these credits help with the challenges that you're describing for women and minority-owned businesses?
Thank you, Senator. I absolutely agree that the two proposals that you mentioned will help to funnel in capital and, more importantly, will help to increase the participation of different types of investors to be able to funnel in money into different types of businesses. Oftentimes, that representation is overlooked, and I do think that both your proposals for the first employee credit as well as the investor credit will help to incentivize participation.
Well, thank you, Ms. Rao. My time is up, but we're really appreciative of having an important Oregon voice on this. We know we've got a lot of heavy lifting to do in this area, and we look forward to working with you and all of our very good witnesses today. It is now Senator Crapo's turn. Okay, hearing none, let me just check. Are we sure that there are no other senators that have questions? Okay. Let me close by saying that today's hearing is the first hearing of the Senate Finance Committee to look at racial, ethnic, and gender disparities under the tax code in decades, if not the first ever hearing on this critically important issue. And it seems to me some important ideas are reflective of witnesses of differing views coming together. For example, after this massive cut in tax enforcement in the last decade, I heard witness after witness saying you have to beef it up. And one of the reasons that I asked the IRS commissioner last week about the tax gap is that I knew that it was far bigger than what was actually a matter of official record. And I knew that the central problem was that too many cheats were getting away with it without any consequences when they chose to ignore the law. So I'm going to close by touching on a point that Professor Brown made hours ago when she said you have to be a detective to find more data about these critical issues that we've been talking about. So I believe it is long past time to make it easier to obtain the key tax data that will illuminate the injustices in our tax law. I believe this can be done in a manner that protects the confidentiality and privacy of all taxpayers. And I am going to be asking senators on this committee to work with me to implement this long overdue and essential transparency reform. With that, I want to thank all our witnesses again. Ms. Rao, you reflected very well on our state this morning. And with that, the Senate Finance Committee is adjourned.